Brisket, baby. I did it. You can too. Come with me while I show you how. And don't forget, if you love brisket, smash that like button. All right, y'all, let's get started on this. Today, we're going to go ahead and do this from beginning to end. So get your station set up, get your cutting board down, get your brisket pulled over. And the first thing that we're really going to want to start doing here is once we get the brisket out, we want to make sure that we kind of look over all of the fat layers. We want to look over the silver skin on the bottom and kind of start a game plan for what we're going to do with this. Now, when it comes to brisket, you have the absolute choice of freedom here. You can either leave it completely untrimmed, and I've seen a lot of people do that, and the brisket turns out amazing, or you can take the path that I'm going to do and actually trim it up some. I start out by getting rid of most of the silver skin on the bottom. So as it cooks, we don't have to worry about that tough membrane feeling in the actual meat. This is going to help with the tenderness, and in my opinion, it's also going to help with the penetration of the flavor into the meat itself. After I'm done with the silver skin on the bottom, I'm going to start trimming some of this decal fat here. This is really thick and really hard fat. It will render eventually, but eventually is the main term there, and it takes a long, long time. So I just get rid of most of it, and then I'll go ahead and I'm going to take care of getting the rest of the silver skin off the bottom before I flip it over. Now, this is the point where I'm going to start shaping the brisket. Again, like I said earlier, if you want to leave this completely like this, you can. I usually like to go for a little more uniform on the flat and the point because it's going to help it cook more evenly. The extra brisket trimming here, I'm actually going to grind up and use for things like burgers. Super delicious, and there's a lot of intermuscular fat here, so you don't have to really worry about adding all that extra fat in there as well. All right, now I'm just making sure that the top of the brisket is kind of even all the way across. I want to make this as level as possible. I want to get off any of the excess hanging over fat, any of the excess hanging over meat, because it's not going to cook as evenly, and it's going to actually create dry spots within the rest of the brisket. All right, now for the seasoning on this, I'm going to use a binder. Again, this is optional. You don't have to worry about that, but I do it because I feel like it makes it stick better. I'm using Worcestershire sauce. You don't actually taste it. You can also use things like mustard or mayo or your binder of choice. It's not going to alter the flavor. You're not going to notice it. It's just your preference on this. For the rub, I'm doing just a salt and pepper rub here. Okay, I'm not doing anything special. You can put anything you want on these. You can do garlic rubs. You can do some sort of spice rub if you want to. That's the wonderful thing about barbecue. And brisket especially is you have the chance to make it your own. So make it your own. Figure out something that sounds amazing, that you think is going to taste fantastic, and try it out. And if it doesn't work, no harm, no foul. You just try something else next time. When you're applying these rubs, these are huge, huge, huge chunks of meat. Apply it very, very liberally. Make sure that you cover everything. Make sure that it's evenly seasoned across the actual brisket itself. That way, while it's cooking, that's going to help develop that bark, and it's going to give you the extra taste that you want. Now, for this cook here, traditionally with brisket, I'll run it at 225 to start. I have extra time with this one, so I'm setting my smoker at 200 degrees. I'm going to let that prep, and then after that's prepped, then we're going to take the brisket out and get it set on there and get it ready to go. All right, so now that the smoker's set, we're going to go ahead and start this. I'm going to go ahead and put this fat side up on my smoker. There's a lot of people that do fat side down, but the vast majority of times that I've ever seen a brisket done and that I ever do a brisket, it's always fat side up. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my thermometer and I'm going to insert it into the point of the brisket. This is the thick portion of the brisket here. I'm going to get it nice and deep into the meat so that I can monitor the temperature. Okay, once we were all said and done with this brisket was on, and it was just after midnight when I put this on. Okay, this is going to be a very long cook. So flash forward, boom. You can already see it's daylight. I'm exhausted. I've been up all night kind of monitoring this. And this is where we're at so far. You can see that the bark is sort of starting to set, that the meat is starting to constrict a little bit. That's how you know that we're not even close to being done. We got a long ways to go. It was about here, and we're about 6.5 hours into this cook at this point, that I went ahead and bumped the temperature from 200 to 225. And now I'm spritzing, and I'm spritzing every 40 minutes. You can use what you want to spritz. In this case, I used half water, half apple cider vinegar. Okay, once we reach an internal temperature of 172, that's when I wrap it. So I lay out the butcher paper. I'm using Wagyu tallow on the base there, so that I can have a little bit of extra moisture. And then on top, I'm putting rendered down brisket fat from the trimming from this brisket. So you'll see I just been able to scoop it out of there. I'm going to put 2 big chunks on the actual butcher paper here. And then as I roll up the brisket, that brisket fat, that rendered fat, is actually going to be pushed back into the meat, and it's going to sit on it as this continues to cook and renders down even more. It's going to give us more juice that's pushed into the meat itself, and it's going to help keep it tender. All right, after that, I'll go ahead and I'm going to fold up the edge here, and then I'm going to start rolling it. So I'm only going to roll this 3 times. I'll roll it first. It's gonna make it upside down. Then I'll roll it again. It's gonna bring it back side up. And then the last portion is me taking the paper itself and rolling that up underneath itself so that it's still meat side down, but we have a nice, firm, tight tuck of this paper here. All right, so now that we've got it wrapped and we're happy with it, back onto the smoker we go. Gonna put this back on here, and now that we're wrapped, I'm taking the temperature of the smoker from 225 and I'm bumping it to 275 for the remainder of my cook. So I'm gonna reinsert my probe. Now what I'm shooting for at this point is an internal temperature of between 203 and 205. My main thing that I'm looking for here is tenderness. So now that I've reached that temperature and I'm happy with the tenderness, we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna pull the brisket off, and I'm putting it in a cooler so that it can slowly come down in temperature. I wanna let it rest, especially on longer cooks, between 3 and 4 hours. Okay, you can see at this point here, it had been cooking, and it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I finally pulled it off. So I set it up there at midnight, pulled it off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then this one, I only had the opportunity to let it rest for about 2 to 2.5 hours. So far less than I usually would. But this is what we worked for. Now we can get into it. We're going to open up the wrapping and we're going to take a look at the bark here. And in my opinion, this is one of the best briskets I've ever made. I'm happy with the way that the bark's set. I'm happy with the feel of the brisket, the tenderness, and there was definitely a lot of juice left over. And obviously when you're cooking a brisket, you got to do the slap test. You got to check and see if it's got some jiggle to it. And here we're just going to go ahead and cut into it now, test it out. The tenderness on this for me was spot on. It definitely holds under its own weight. The bark was maintained throughout the process. It wasn't falling off or goopy. And even the caps of the brisket itself, usually the driest points, still had a lot of moisture in them. So I appreciate you guys sticking with me this long. Don't forget to subscribe in case you want to see stuff like this in the future. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments section. I'll try to get to you as soon as I can. And otherwise, thanks for being here, and go out and cook yourself some barbecue. Cook yourself some brisket, try it, let me know how it goes out for you.